Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Josh Bam Bam Brown. Welcome back to Brown Overboard. Toxic masculinity does not exist. Toxic masculinity is a phrase that I have heard thrown around. It's a recently invented phrase that people use to facilitate their talking points, and they use to try and illustrate that they think there is something inherently wrong with certain traits that masculine men may exhibit. Now, there is no such thing as toxic masculinity, just like there's no such thing as toxic femininity. It doesn't exist, because how feminine you are or how masculine you are has absolutely nothing to do with how toxic you are. Now, there are definitely horrible people in the world. There are definitely people who exhibit a lot of toxic traits and toxicity in the world. But how masculine they are or how feminine they are has absolutely nothing to do with an individual's toxic traits. Now, if you Google it, toxic masculinity is described as, it is defined by adherence to traditional male gender roles, consequently stigmatize and limit the emotions boys and men may comfortably express while elevating their emotions such as anger. It is marked by economic, political, and social expectations that men seek and achieve dominance. Blah, 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 blah. It's not a thing, guys. It's not a thing. There are simply toxic people, and that's what it boils down to. There are people who are toxic, and they're bad parents, and they raise people in a toxic way. But it doesn't matter if you're extremely feminine or if you're extremely masculine. A woman can be toxic as well and raise her kids in a toxic manner. A man can be toxic and raise his kids in a toxic manner. And the guy can be extremely masculine, or the guy can be very effeminate and still raise their kids in a toxic manner, because that's what toxic people do. They are toxic all the time to everybody, pretty much. And that is simply the case. That's how some humans are. They're toxic people. Look online. Look at a lot of people online that just want to say nasty things and be nasty people, right? A lot of people are just really miserable, and they want to pull everybody down with them, and that's a thing, and that's always been a thing, probably always will be a thing, and that's just the way some people are. Now, when it comes to the idea that men are raised, when they're raised masculine, to be more angry and not in touch with their emotions, that's simply not true. Simply not true, because there are several factors that go into being raised by and as a masculine man. And I have a distinct viewpoint on this that I can definitely speak on, because my dad was pretty macho. He was a very masculine guy. He was the embodiment of a macho masculine dude out there in the wilderness. I was raised by Jeremiah Johnson. I was raised by that guy, right? So I can definitely speak on something like this, and I have a different perspective for these kinds of things. I think that one thing that happens in modern times, where we're so far removed from the idea of survival, people get a little bit infantilized, is what kind of happens. And there's a softness that tends to convey in people, or breed into people, or grow inside people. It's something that people seem to perpetuate the more controlled their life is, and the further removed from survival they get. The closer you get to a survival situation, the more masculine you're going to become. It's that simple. When you get far enough removed from civilization and into a stringent enough survival scenario, everyone's going to be out there sharpening sticks, trying to hunt something to kill it and eat it. That's the way it is. You go caveman very quickly in a true survival situation. And I was raised as an adult from like 6 years old. I mean, in the olden times, teenagers were treated like adults. Like you were treated like an adult from like 13 up. And one of the reasons that that was done the way it was since the Stone Age is because like the parents never knew when their offspring were going to have to fend for themselves. The parents never knew when they might be taken out, when they might not come back from a hunt, when illness could strike, when a warring tribe could come in and wipe everybody out. So they never knew when their offspring was going to need to exist on their own. And so that's one of the reasons why humans way back were treated like adults early on. And my dad treated me like an adult from the time I was about 6 years old. And I don't mean in a there's no Santa Claus, there's no magic in the world kind of way. Because yes, there's a Santa Claus, kids. I mean in a way that I was treated with respect and given autonomy to be able to process things like an adult. My dad didn't talk down to me. He explained things to me in a very clear adult manner. I knew the difference between life and death. I knew about survival and not surviving. I was taught how to hunt and fish and track and all these things and all the basic ideas of survival in life. And I think one misconception about like boys when they're taught growing up and when you're taught by like a masculine dude growing up is that you're taught not to cry. Like that's a big one I hear a lot of people talk about. They're like, you know, boys are always told don't cry. Now, personally, I think a real man only cries alone in the shower. But the truth of it is that boys are taught crying doesn't solve the problem. That's the thing. Boys are taught that crying is not going to feed you. Crying is not going to make the pain go away. Crying can't solve a broken heart. Crying is not going to fix the problem. Everybody cries. Not me, but everybody else. Everybody cries. It's a human thing. You get sad, you cry, right? But dudes are taught that that's not going to fix things. That's not going to solve the problem. And I don't just mean little boys. I mean, you know, dudes, girls, we're all boys, girls. Everybody is raised or should be raised in a way to which they are in touch with their emotions and with reality. Because it's also a stoic philosophy to be in touch with one's emotions, not to be emotionless, but to be in touch with your emotions, to be able to control your emotions, to master your emotions and not allow them to control you. Because if you don't control your emotions will control you. And that doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. That's just the way it is. Now, when it comes to the idea of being emotionally intelligent. Now, emotional intelligence is not about being more emotional. It's not about expressing more emotion about things. It's not about conveying your emotions to others. Emotional intelligence is being able to recognize and discern the emotions of others. It is being able to tell how someone else is feeling and act appropriately. It's being able to process your emotions, not be controlled by them, understand your emotions, be able to move past them. And primarily, emotional intelligence is about recognizing the emotions of others and understanding what other people are feeling and what other people are going through. That is emotional intelligence. And when you are a truly masculine individual, that is something that you realize. Because another thing being masculine is the inherent instinct and drive to protect and to facilitate the protection of others and to take care of other people. No one embodied that. No one has embodied that more than my dad. Because his entire drive for everything he ever did was to provide for and take care of his family. And he did it in the most macho way possible, and in a lot of not as macho ways. Dad wrote children's stories for us, and he wrote poems and stuff. I write poetry almost on a daily basis. I crochet and knit and oil paint and do all these things that people would consider less masculine. But that goes into the idea of what in that way is masculine and or feminine. Because I would argue there's nothing masculine or feminine about knowing how to sew your own clothes. It's simply a skill that, quite frankly, I think everyone should have. I am capable of mending my own things. I can make my own clothes. I can tailor my own stuff, right? I've made leather jackets. I'm working on a leather jacket right now and a pair of leather pants. Like I can sew shirts and mend them and take care of stuff and do all that. And it's something that people should be able to do because that's a level of self-reliance. And there's nothing inherently feminine about being able to sew. Just like there's nothing inherently masculine about knowing how to start a fire. It's simply a skill and a survival skill that everyone should have and everyone used to have. Because that's another thing, like people these days talk about like starting a fire like that's a manly thing. When actually in the olden days, a lot of times it was the ladies keeping the fire going and starting the fire and doing that stuff and gathering wood for the fire. If you actually like study some of those things, because there are things that people look at as inherently masculine traits when really what they are is inherently survival oriented traits is what it is. And when it comes to this description that they have about elevating other emotions such as anger, definitely not a thing. Who's teaching their kids to be angrier? That's not a thing. If you're teaching your kids to be angrier, then yeah, that's definitely a toxic trait for you to do that. That is like what moron would do that. That's definitely not a good thing to do. I don't think anybody, macho or masculine or otherwise, is out there purposefully teaching their kids to be angrier. Like that's not a thing, guys. That's definitely not a thing. I think some of the twisting of something like that is the fact that dudes raising dudes, you're taught to defend yourself. You're taught to stick up for yourself. You're taught to defend others. You're taught how to use your anger. And you're not taught to be angry, to like let things get to you. Because that's another thing, just like how crying isn't going to solve your problem, being angry at the thing isn't going to solve your problem either. And that's another part of Stoic philosophy as well, and another part of being truly masculine and being raised in that way, is that getting angry and throwing your tools is not going to fix the problem. You have to be level-headed. You got to be calm. You got to stay cool and collected. Don't cry. Don't get angry. Don't whine about the thing. Fix the thing. Make the thing work, or let go and move on and realize it's not going to. Because a big thing about being masculine is understanding the world in a way of which you know what you can tackle, what you need to let go of, and being strong enough to do that. And I think a lack of masculinity in a lot of ways is what leads people to be frustrated and angry, and what leads people to be sad and depressed. Because when you are a capable individual, when you are a masculine individual, when you're, I can't speak to the lived experience of women because I'm not one, but I can definitely speak to the lived experience of a man because I am one. So when you are a capable guy and you know that you could be dropped off on that island over there with a pocket knife and do just fine, maybe not perfectly comfortable, but do just fine and have no problem surviving, there is a sense of stability that gives you within yourself. I think that for a lot of men, it's possible that having a lack of a masculine foundation can cause you to feel more lost or down on yourself, or being depressed can cause depression. Because, like I was saying, when you're a capable individual, when you're a guy that knows how to handle himself, when you're someone that knows how to fight and hunt and start a fire and build a shelter and do all of these things, then it gives you a sense of stability. It gives you an edge. And it makes you more in touch with yourself and more in touch with nature. And that gives you more of an ability to control your emotions. It gives you more of an ability not to be toxic. It gives you more control, because the people out there running around who are toxic, the people out there running around who are bullies, the people doing those things, those are not people who are in control of their emotions. Those are not people who are masculine. Those are not people who are in control of who and what they are. They're not moving through the world confidently. Because the individuals who have a lack of control over themselves, who have a lack of control over their life, those are the people who try to exert as much control as they can on everything else. That's where you get the person that is a tyrant at work. That's where you get the person that manages the 7-Eleven and goes to work being a tyrant and taking out his lack of control in his personal life and his lack of control with himself out on other people. So his lack of inward control is causing him to lash out and control everything he can on the outside. So toxic masculinity doesn't exist. Not a thing. Another thing, when you create definitions like that, when you create hyphenated words, or you create sayings in that way, you create a definable sentence, you are doing a disservice to the other word. Like, I don't know, do they hyphenate it, or is it 2 words? All right. It is 2 words. It is toxic masculinity. So it's not hyphened. So when you make a saying like that, or a term like that, you're doing a massive disservice to the first word, because you're putting a negative context onto that first word as if that thing is inherently negative. And what will happen over time is that the first word is going to start getting viewed more like it is the negative thing itself, even when not attached to the second word. So it makes it where if toxic masculinity becomes enough of a thing and is recognized enough as a thing, it makes it where when you hear the word masculinity, you immediately think that that's a bad word, that's a bad thing. It starts making the context to that word associated with the word you've attached it to, if you get what I'm saying. And that is not a good thing. Because masculinity is a good thing, just like femininity is a good thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a macho, woodcutting dude, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with being a pink princess and a Barbie doll girl. And there's nothing wrong with you falling into any variation along those categories. If you're a guy that is inherently more feminine, nothing wrong with being who you are. If you're a girl that's inherently more masculine, nothing wrong with being who you are. If you're a dude that's super macho, nothing wrong with being who you are. If you're a girl that is super feminine, nothing wrong with being who you are. Be you, be real, be free, be yourself. There's nothing wrong with where you fall anywhere on that spectrum. But what I'm saying is that there's absolutely nothing wrong with masculinity. Toxic masculinity doesn't exist. And yes, I know I've repeated myself multiple times, but like, I watched a podcast recently and they were talking about toxic masculinity and going on and on and on and on about all these things and the way that masculinity is terrible and has been terrible throughout history and all these things. When the reality, I finished it and watched it, but I was like, it was tough to get all the way through it. I'll admit it. It was tough to make it all the way through that, but I did because I'm doing research, right? I'm doing research for my podcast, And I watched several, and quite a few actually on the subject, and have read about it and have heard people talk about it and all these things. And I just could not disagree more with the idea of toxic masculinity. Because you want to talk about historically, well, masculinity is the only reason why there's a human race at all. The only reason why the human race has survived through the Stone Age and every other age throughout history is because of masculinity. We would have never survived as a species if not for inherently masculine macho dudes with pointed sticks keeping everybody alive. That is a historical fact. It is simply that way. Because without masculinity, there would be no human race. Because something else that happens when you live inside the bubble of society long enough, where you're protected to such a degree and you are so far removed from the violence to which is needed to protect you, you don't realize how visceral and how violent reality actually is. From a microbial life all the way up is visceral and it's violent. And nature does not reward weakness. It doesn't. Nature does not reward weakness. And I'm not talking about kindness and cruelty here. I'm talking about weakness, an ability to survive, an ability to defend yourself. And when it comes to the natural world, masculinity keeps you alive. Masculinity makes survival possible. And I would argue that femininity makes survival worthwhile. Because that's another thing. Femininity is not about makeup and dresses and hairstyles. I grew up and have existed in a world where it is devoid of almost anything feminine. Very little femininity in the world to which I've existed the majority of my life. So I have a different viewpoint on that than most people probably do. Because when you've existed in the world with all the soft stuff, you don't notice it as much. And you boil it down to a bunch of like simple things like makeup and hairstyles and dresses and things like that. And that's simply not the case. Because when it comes to femininity, when it comes to women, everything about them is different than a guy. Everything. And I mean everything. And I view it almost magically. It's almost magical. It's almost like a unicorn or angelic. Now, I'm not saying women can't be horrible people. Women can be the bad guy too. But there is just something special, magical, and angelic about women and about femininity in general. There's something that is captured with that doesn't exist in any other capacity. And that's why I say there's a magic to that, because the natural world is very visceral, very violent, very, it forces you to be very masculine. Like my life has forced me to be very masculine, to be very macho, to be able to handle those things and be that guy. I've never been afforded the opportunity to be soft at all. And not in a bad way. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's given me an extreme edge. It's made me who I am. And like we already discussed, I have no problem with things that people would consider softer. And I've gotten a little spoiled to having nice sheets and a comfortable pillow. There was a time in my life where I was fine with a pillowcase full of rocks and my jacket for a blanket. I've gotten a little bit spoiled to I do enjoy a soft pillow and some nice sheets. But I digress. When you've experienced life to the extremes that I have, it just gives you a different perspective on that stuff. And if you're somebody that's never been in a survival situation, it's probably easy for you to look down on the idea of masculinity. And if you're somebody that has been in those situations, you realize how quickly things devolve into masculinity and being strong and capable and having to do those things in survival situations. And the closer you get to those situations, the more masculine you're going to get, and the more masculine you're going to have to be. So the idea that raising a kid to be a masculine individual is inherently a bad thing and that everybody should be raised to be soft is just an incorrect philosophy. Should you be raised to be angry? No, that doesn't make any sense. And like I said, I don't think anybody out there is raising their kids to be angry. And if they are, that person's just a psychopath and not a good person. They're not toxically masculine. They're a nut. And that's just my viewpoint on that, and just something that I wanted to talk about a little bit because it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think that a lot of people that want to use that as a talking point, a lot of people that want to throw around toxically masculine and that kind of stuff, don't understand what true masculinity actually is. So I would suggest that not only do you try to embrace the natural world a little bit and get some understanding of how the natural world actually works and how you exist in the natural world, I would suggest also do more studying on actual masculinity. Do some more studying on what it actually means to be a masculine guy. Because a truly masculine guy is in touch with his emotions. A truly masculine guy is capable in all those different facets of human existence, because you're taught to be, because you have to be, because true survival is not possible if you're not capable of regulating your emotions. And I think that's one of the main things that it boils down to, is that people want to blame being macho and masculine for not being able to regulate your emotions, when in reality, there are just toxic people, there are horrible people, and it's got nothing to do with being a man or a woman, it's got nothing to do with being feminine or masculine, and it has everything to do with people having a lack of control over themselves. All right, guys, I will see y'all next time for another episode of Brown Overboard.